Hey, folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another East Tennessee fishing report with Ellis Ward. Ellis, how are you?
I'm a little hot right now, but I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay out of trouble. Yeah, it was funny. We were talking before we started recording, and I was in your neck of the woods last week, and you were telling me I'm kind of unlucky with the weather because I seem to show up when it's boiling hot.
Yeah, I think you were here last year during... It didn't, we're sitting on top of a little bit of an air conditioner when we're on the river, but when it's in the upper 90s, it really doesn't matter. If the fortunate part for fishing is that we still have 60-degree water, but man, being under that full sun and just out exposed when it's 90-something, upper 90s, it taxes you a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't buy any of that malarkey that Matt Riley's peddling that, it's a little bit cooler and drier where he is. I think that's a lie.
Well, he's full of it and has been for years. So
So the silver lining of all of this is, ironically, while I get on a plane to go to Orlando to see what it's like to visit the tropics for ICAST, you're actually going to get a pretty decent break in the heat around Johnson City, and you're going to get... I was looking at your weather, like after maybe tomorrow, you're going to get a spate of days in the 80s with some rain and cloud cover. So you should be happy as a clam.
Yeah, it's a mix of happy and I'm sort of backloaded this month. So early plug, book your trips. It's nice to have these days for my own fishing when I don't have trips. But yeah, I had last week a good couple trips, and yeah, this week it just coincides with a break in trips and also a break in weather. I'm always pretty good at taking advantage of that, but the happy as a clam part turns into, oh man, I need that. I need the one who wants to be out here and when it's quote unquote bad weather out. But we end up getting plenty of those. So definitely feeling positive about the rainfall, because it's been, on the Watauga we get the 5-hour pushes every afternoon for 6 days a week. So it's not like we're hurting for good streamer conditions, dry fly conditions, big water, cool temps, happy trout, all that stuff is here. But having the tributaries full and having that water table bump up a little bit makes everything a little happier. And, for the smallmouth and musky water around here, we need it. We're certainly not as dry as some areas. Talking with Richie back in D.C., he was saying that the Potomac up by Harper's Ferry in Maryland was up to 91 degrees. So I think the whole region, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, needs a good shot of rain. And at least for this little zone I think we might get dumped on tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, which is great, right? Because then you can pull streamers on the mud line at where the Doe River comes into the Watauga.
Yeah, man, you know it. And that whole lower section, and I can reserve some of those thoughts for a conversation around low water fishing, but that was, we've had a couple of those. I think we were talking before recording that, you'd been here, and then, we had a shot of rain or two, and I had a guy a day after one of those, and it was just these bumps, and everyone who fishes freestones knows this. The bumps that happen during the summer are, and I've seen some memes that joke about this, where it's lower here or blown out and muddy, and you get like one day or maybe a half a day where it's not that. And the nice part about the Watauga, the South Holston, to a certain extent, it's not as influenced by tributaries, but when it's low and clear above the Doe, but below the Doe, because that's a freestone coming in that's chocolate milk, it can provide for some pretty cool opportunities if you know where the fish are and you know where the rocks are, because you can't really see them when you're rowing over them. So we had a couple big eats to kick things off, and we learned quickly that rod setting with a 1/0 hook is a good way to feel the inside of a brown trout's mouth, but not see the fish.
Yeah, well, there you go. So it's interesting, right? So you're going to cool off. You're going to have cloud cover, which I would imagine for your streamer bite is going to make the fish a little bit chasier, right?
Yeah, dry fly fishing, everything, the birds, the bugs. I won't get too spooky, but maybe even the plants. It just, you can feel it when you're out there. The spook with everything drops.
Yeah. And then I would say too, right? I mean, you should see a little bit more predictability around your hatches in that situation, because you're going to have a little bit better predictability on cloud cover and temperature.
Yeah. The hatches and where we're fishing for risers and what that looks like can change a little bit with the clear water and more stable flows or low flows. The fishing can be tough, but it can be a little more predictable in the sense that I know where the fish are going to be, and at what times and in which sections, and to a certain extent what they're going to be eating. And when the water's bigger, those dry fly places move around a little bit, but they're still very much there. The high water does absolutely nothing to turn them off. It just sort of switches things a little bit. And then when you throw a cloud cover in, you start to get, it's not just the last 2 hours of daylight. It's not just the 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. It can sort of fluctuate throughout the day, and where they're eating and what they're eating can change, and it opens things up a little bit.
Yeah, very, very cool. And we've got a question for you from Brenner. And, since we've been doing low, clear, shallow water in the summer, he wanted to get your thoughts on dry fly and leader setup.
Yeah. So with the tailwaters, I've been fishing. I've said this enough times to where I'm not sure if it's redundant at this point, but I don't like to drink my own Kool-Aid. I think I do a little bit with the dry fly setups. I am, at this point, if it's a 9-foot leader, that doesn't feel right to me. And it has less to do with spook from the leader, and I think this is somewhat universal. It's we're not talking about just the tailwaters, but it is relative to fly size. And so when you're fishing flies that are in the 20, 22, 24, which is not uncommon at all, even when you're seeing 16s, 18s, if you look into the water, if you look at what the fish are eating, just kind of look around at I refer to it as the fuzz in the air and right above the water. There's a huge biomass that is made up of way smaller than the 18s. And, sometimes some of these 20s even look big. So when you're getting down that small, it has to do more with, I compare it to fishing a Clouser minnow on 50-pound carbon with a clinch knot. It's going to look like it's being moved through the water by a stick. And so fishing 15-pound fluoro, loop knot, it's nice and wiggly. You do that with dry fly fishing, and everything starts to get, all these little changes get magnified. So fishing a size 22 with 5X tippet, you just look at the knot you're tying, it's a quarter size of the bug. And so the way that is not necessarily they're seeing the knot or seeing the tippet, it's that there's not much freedom of movement. The biggest piece of mass at that terminal end is the tippet and maybe the knot versus the fly being delivered by that tippet. So going down to 6.5, which at this point, I also feel a little spoiled because 6X is 3.2 pounds. I think if you get the fancy fluoro, it's up to 3.5. That's a big trout. And at the end of the day, outside of too many horsepower on the initial hook set, which is a good way to snap big fish off. Fishing bugs that small, you don't have to put a lot of pressure onto it. So you can afford to do take that 9-foot 5X leader and just add an extra 1.5 foot, I would say, of 6X, maybe cut some 5X back and add 6X onto that. And it's really hard to put 3+ pounds of pressure onto a fish with a bend in a 4 or 5 weight. So it becomes less about breaking them off, during the fight. It's really that last lifting into the net or getting them to your feet if you're waiting, and the initial hook set. The stuff in between is playing fish. I think if you get a good fish on 6X and it turns and runs on you and you hold on to it, you're probably going to break it off on 5X anyway. So, I'd certainly say going down to 6.5. That was kind of limited to one or two of the manufacturers, but most of the companies that are making tippet are making them in 0.5s, and that 6.5 is kind of a good range to be in. And unless you have, I am a bit of a diva when it comes to the dry fly presentations, and there's different leader setups you can get. When you are going down that small, there's different options you can get, but Rio and Scientific Anglers both make some of these finesse presentations that they don't start super fat, and so you can afford to be fishing them, and they unroll nicely on lighter weight line, and just things that deliver flies that are a little smaller, especially at both close and long ranges. It's important to consider all of that. And I mean, once you get your system in place, it can be a little clunky to get there. It becomes copy and paste to a certain extent, because you know what works. So you don't have to reinventing the wheel there a little bit to get to that happy place. But once you're there, it's totally worth it.
Yeah. And I would imagine on the streamer front, probably, you're probably pretty much running the same rig all the time anyway, right? I mean, it's just a question of you maybe get to step up a little bit if the water's stained, but I mean, they're not leader shy. So it's not like you're fishing 6X with a D&D, right?
No, and also no, to a degree, the leader setup with streamers kind of varies. The butt and we'll say the midsection of the quote unquote leader is not necessarily tapered, but I go from 25 to 20, and in bigger water or fishing just big flies where we're fishing a game changer and moving it fast, and I'm worried less about how things are turning over and moving in between strips, and more about getting this big fly there. And there's so much mass relative to the leader and line system on bigger flies that you can afford to stay at 20 pounds. And when you're fishing low and clear, it's the same principle with the dry fly, where fishing the drunk or even fishing the simpler strip flies with weight on them, like the peanut, you going down to 15. I tend to avoid 12 from the boat because we're fishing in water, and really when it compiles, because when we are fishing 12, or when there is that need to drop down below 15 or below 20, it's probably because we're getting really sneaky with our casting. And I like to do that all the time, but it becomes required when the fishing is harder. And we're doing that in areas that have fast moving water adjacent to them. And normally we're in the boat water. And so it's pretty easy to snap 12-pound mono or fluoro. And so I kind of like to stay in that 15 and do a loop knot. And most of the flies, most of the streamers outside of the real small ones or the real big ones they can be happily delivered with a 15-pound fluoro and a loop knot.
Oh, well, there you go. And, we love questions at the Articulate Fly, folks. You can email them to us or DM us on social media, whatever is easiest for you. And if we use your question, I will send you some Articulate Fly swag, and we're going to enter a drawing for some cool stuff from Ellis at the end of the season. And Ellis, before I let you go and plan what you're going to do with all this awesome weather that you have, you want to let folks know where they can find you so they can book you and fish with you?
Yeah. Website is elliswardflies.com, and you can follow me on Instagram at Ellis Ward Guides. Best way to contact me about trips or asking any questions is to text or call at 513-543-0019.
There you go. And don't forget, folks, we've got a great community here at the Articulate Fly. We host it on Patreon, and two of the benefits, if you have a bucktail addiction, there's a level of membership that will help you out with some of Ellis's roadkill. And then also, if you want to go out and fish with Ellis, we've got another tier where you actually get a guide credit every year. So you might want to check those out. And, weather's improving. And as I always say, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Ellis.
Appreciate it, Marv.